Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the 2023 Mississippi gubernatorial election, and being specific, why I think Democrats are in a position to lose this race, probably by a pretty decent amount. So, in case you haven't been following this race too closely, there was initially a lot of hype with Democrats here back at the beginning of the year when Brandon Presley, who is the Public Service Commissioner of the Northern District, I don't know the exact boundary, but it's something in this region, northern Mississippi, which is a Republican-leaning area. The district did vote for Trump, and Brandon Presley did win as a Democrat, so the argument was that he would win the state, the governorship, because he has appealed to Trump voters, at least within his district. And there were, there's a lot of hype about him. There still is. There was a poll a few weeks ago that had him tied with Tate Reeves, so that was a Democratic poll. And there's still a lot of people who think he can win, and maybe think he'll come close. But today I want to talk about why I think that this is not going to happen, why I think Brandon Presley will, in fact, lose by a good amount, and probably by more than the most recent Democratic candidate in a gubernatorial election, Jim Hood, who lost to Tate Reeves, who is now running for re-election, will likely win in November. And so let's just get into it here. So I do want to start with the 2019 governor's race, because this was, again, the most recent election. We'll talk about the 2020 presidential election in the state in a second here, but just look at this race. You'll notice that it was a decently close race. This isn't the final margin. I think Reeves won by a little less than this, but he's ahead here by 5.5. I think he won by like maybe 5.1 or something. I don't know exactly, but it was within that range. Although when he did stop updating. So just kind of look at this. As you can see here, the counties on the border of the state with Arkansas and Louisiana, they were very favorable to Jim Hood, the Democrat. Hinds County, which is where Jackson is, netted him 40,000 votes, so that was his biggest county, and he did well in some of these other counties up here, specifically in the north as well. But Tate Reeves won because in these rural, mostly white counties, he held up, and in the more Republican-leading cities, you look at Harrison, which is where I think Gulfport and Biloxi, although I think I mispronounced it. I think it might be pronounced differently, but I'm not a Mississippian. I've never been to Mississippi, so if I'm mispronouncing that, my apologies. Either way, though, this is a more ancestrally Republican county. Hattiesburg, Forest County was pretty good for Tate Reeves. He held on to it. Tupelo in Lee County was favorable to him, and he also did very well in Rankin County, which is right outside of Hinds County. The most famous Republican county in the state. It netted him 14,000 votes, and this is one of your classic southern suburbs that's very white, very not very wealthy, but still upper middle class, I guess you could say, within their states. They're among the wealthier regions, and they are very Republican, even though they are left trending. In fact, if you go to 2020, it did trend towards Joe Biden compared to Hillary Clinton, but nevertheless still very red. So this was actually, in my opinion, a pretty decent showing for Jim Hood. Jim Hood was the former, I believe, Attorney General of the state, so he was the last statewide Democrat to win. He won back in 2015, then ran for governor and was defeated. So he was probably the best candidate they could have gotten. I think Brandon Presley in 2023 is a good candidate too, because he did win a Republican district, but it's not the same as winning statewide. So I think already Presley's a downgrade from Jim Hood. We also have the advantage for Republicans. Tate Reeves is now the incumbent, and he's not very popular. His approval ratings are always very mediocre. But nevertheless, he is still consistently, incumbents still consistently outperform, or they can perform better than they did the first time. So I think that's overall a plus, just historically, for Tate Reeves. And then I think the final element of this is that Democrats control the White House, And obviously, if that was the only thing you were going off in 2022, you would have been very wrong. The people who said Republicans are going to do well just because they're out of power, those people were proven wrong. And I'm glad I didn't subscribe to that entirely, because that I would have had a very bad midterm cycle last year. But what I will say is that there's a role that it plays here, and it does cap how well you can do it. Mississippi is a red state. Trump won it by 16 points in 2020. He'll probably win it by a similar amount next time. And I do think that realistically, to win Mississippi as a Democrat, you have to be a good candidate, but you also have to have some national momentum. And Democrats, they're doing fine. They're holding up well right now in special elections, but are they doing well enough to win Mississippi? I don't think so. So I do want to talk about the 2020 election here, because I think that as important as this election was, I think 2020 might be a better benchmark because it was more recent. It was a more nationalized race. And in 2019, Democrats, they did really well just in terms of national environment, and they're still doing well, but they're not doing as well as they were back when Trump was president. So Donald Trump won Mississippi by 16.5 in 2020. He defeated Biden by over 200,000 votes. So it wasn't very close. As you can see, Biden did well in the same areas Jim Hood did well in. He did very well these border counties along Arkansas and Louisiana. These are majority black areas, and they're mostly rural. Don't cast a ton of votes, but they are very favorable to Democrats. They do stack up to, a couple 100,000 votes. Hinds County, Jackson, Mississippi, obviously Biden did very well there. But outside of that, wasn't too much support for him. In Harrison County, that's where Gulfport is, he lost by nearly 20,000 votes. Forest County, Hattiesburg, he lost by 4,000 votes. And then up in Lee County, Tupelo, he lost by over 12,000 votes. And again, DeSoto County is another big one. It's left trending. I think Biden did significantly better than Hillary Clinton. He still lost it by a little under 20,000 votes. And then it was similar in terms of margin for Tate Reeves. He won it by 23. Trump also won it, I believe, by 24. So those areas are historically Republican. Obviously, Biden underperformed Jim Hood in Rankin County as he did statewide. But those are more affluent parts of the state, and they're very Republican, they're very white, and they are very, very conservative. And so those areas I think Tate Reeves will do fine in because, again, the argument against Tate Reeves for Democrats is that he's bad for education and bad for healthcare. Brandon Presley's campaigning on, affording or expanding access to affordable healthcare for Mississippians. He's campaigning on, Tate Reeves has failed us in terms of funding our public schools, stuff like that. And there's an argument to be made there, right? Like, regardless of what you think of Tate Reeves, Mississippi has, I think, the worst ranked public schools in the country. There's an argument to be made, and that could be a winning issue for Brandon Presley. The problem is that for him to win, he has to convince a good amount of Republicans to vote for him over the incumbent governor they elected last time. And again, in theory, if you look at Tate Reeves' job as governor and how his approval rating looks, it's possible, but white voters in Mississippi are among the most racially polarized in the country. In fact, the last time white voters voted for a Democrat, I wasn't even alive, and at least at a federal or gubernatorial level. And so that is pretty striking because I've been alive for a lot of election cycles in Mississippi, and it hasn't happened once. That is how polarized it is. Even in Alabama, I think white voters have preferred Democrats, or at least come close to, in some races. Like in the 2017 Senate race, I think Doug Jones cracked 40 with white voters, maybe. And that I don't think that's going to happen in Mississippi anytime soon. And so if you look at exit polls, Donald Trump won 81% of white voters in 2020, and they make up 70% of the electorate. So that's the ball game, right? Democrats are going to do well with black voters. I think Brandon Presley's going to do well with them. And they make up a decent chunk of the electorate, but you have to win by winning over some amount of white voters. And Presley's trying to do that. He knows that. But is it possible? Not really. So in 2019, like I said, we don't really have specific exit polls for this race, but you can see the more white areas of Mississippi, Hood might have outperformed Joe Biden by a little bit, but he didn't do enough to win. And so I think Presley's going to fall into a similar trap. I think Brandon Presley will likely outperform Joe Biden in some of those more white areas, but it won't be by enough. And Tate Reeves, as the incumbent governor, will likely win by 10 or 11. Trump won by 16.5, so Presley would still, if he lost by 11, he'd still outperform Biden by a good amount. I think he's a fine candidate. But again, Mississippi is a red state. White voters there don't really have a reason to cross over for him, and I do think that when you look at the polls and you look at turnout, I think it's going to really end up benefiting Tate Reeves in the end. So as of right now, that's what I said. I think Reeves wins by 10, maybe a little closer. Democrats, they've been outperforming as of late, but I would be surprised if it got really close. So those are my thoughts. Let me know what yours are in the comment section down below. Tell me what you want to see next, and I'll see you all in the next video.